Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord. When you live with any amount of fear, be it personal fear, communal fear, or the low hum of anxiety that seems baked into the air nowadays, one of the sneakiest temptations is to make yourself smaller. I have been tempted by this quite a lot for sure. To stay quiet, to blend in, to keep your head down, to say, I'll just get through this week. And honestly, sometimes that shrinking feels like wisdom. Sometimes it feels like survival. But then we hear Jesus in Matthew's gospel, and he doesn't sound like someone who expects his people to disappear. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. It's not you should become, nor is it one day you might be, but you are, which is either terrifying or incredibly helpful. I'll let you decide which. As a novice brother in the Brotherhood of St. Gregory and as someone trying to live the gospel in California, just like you, I feel the tension of this all the time. How to live faithfully without becoming frantic. How to be steady without being numb. How to be engaged without being devoured by the noise. These readings today offer a surprisingly practical answer. Don't shrink. Don't harden. Don't perform. Instead, live the kind of goodness that fear can't counterfeit. The kind of goodness that tastes like salt and shines like light. Now, as someone who likes to cook, I understand the importance of salt. This reminds me of a sea story. Back in the late 90s, when I was on my first submarine, the USS West Virginia, we ran out of salt. Well, we didn't so much as run out as one of the poor cooks accidentally dumped an entire bag of Coca-Cola syrup into the salt drawer and ruined it all. You see, we were at the end of our 3-month cruise, and it's not an easy thing to resupply a submarine. So the captain decided we'd be fine for the last 2 weeks. Salt is bad for you anyway, he said. Now, has anyone ever cooked something and forgotten to add salt? Or baked bread without it? As we made all of our food from scratch on board at that time, you can imagine what our food tasted like. For 2 weeks straight, we felt like prisoners on rations. The unsalted bread tasted like cardboard, and we ran through the Mrs. Lowry's seasoned salt like our lives depended on it. Turns out you can't cook with that. That doesn't do the same thing as salt. We ran out of that pretty quickly, too. We put it on everything. One thing I learned about salt is that it isn't loud. No one thinks about how important it is until it's gone. Salt doesn't grandstand. Salt does not trend. Salt doesn't post a TikTok video about itself. Salt just works. It preserves what would rot. It brings out flavor that's already there even when it's hidden. It makes bland food taste like something you'd actually want to share. And Jesus says, that's you. In times of fear, we often assume the only effective response is to be louder, more intense, more outraged, more on. But Jesus offers a different picture. Quiet faithfulness that makes the world less bland and less spoiled. Which immediately raises a question: what does it mean to lose our saltiness? Sometimes it looks like despair, like when we stop believing our lives can make any difference at all. Sometimes it looks like cynicism, like when we treat goodness as naive. Sometimes it looks like performative religion, more concerned with optics than with love. And that's where Isaiah steps in like a prophet with his sleeves rolled up. God is not interested in religious performance that leaves people hungry. Isaiah is blunt, so blunt it can sound harsh. But underneath that sharpness is mercy. God is confronting a people who are fasting, praying, and wondering why nothing is changing. They're doing religion, but they're also exploiting workers, quarreling, and ignoring suffering. And God says, in essence, if your worship doesn't change how you treat people, it's not worship yet. I'll say that one more time. If your worship doesn't change how you treat people, it's not worship yet. The passage goes on to describe the fast God chooses: loosening the bonds of injustice, sharing bread with the hungry, bringing the homeless poor into your house, covering the naked. He is describing living mercy in public. Then comes one of my favorite verses. When I hear it or read it, I'm filled with hope and comfort. Then your light shall break forth like the dawn. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and he will say, here I am. Notice what God promises here. Not just that we will become more active, but that light will break forth, just like the dawn does. Dawn doesn't ask for permission from the darkness. Dawn doesn't negotiate. Dawn just arrives. So if fear is whispering nothing will change, Isaiah replies, God is still in the business of dawn. And Isaiah isn't describing superheroics either. He's describing real-life righteousness. Food shared, burdens lifted, relationships repaired, policies challenged, people treated as people. That's salt. That's light. The truly righteous life isn't flashy. It's generous. The psalm today gives us a glimpse of what that kind of life looks like. The righteous are gracious and merciful. They deal generously and lend. They are not afraid of evil tidings. Their hearts are firm, secure in the Lord. Those lines are so important for these times of fear we find ourselves in right now. It does not say the righteous never hear evil tidings. It says they are not ruled by them. Not by denial, not by adrenaline, but by a practical steadiness. A life shaped over time toward generosity and trust. The psalm even links righteousness with how we handle money and power. They have distributed freely. They have given to the poor. In other words, fear makes us hoard. God makes us generous. And if that sounds impossible, Paul steps in. Our courage doesn't come from cleverness. It comes from the Spirit. Paul says he didn't come with lofty words or human wisdom, but with a message centered on Jesus and in demonstration of the Spirit and power. This is one of the most liberating truths for anxious times. Our faith does not depend on being impressive. We do not have to out-argue the chaos. We do not have to be spiritually sophisticated. We do not have to be fearless as a personality trait. Paul's confidence is that God gives us a different kind of knowing. These things God has revealed to us through the Spirit. So when Jesus says, let your light shine, he's not saying, manufacture your own radiance. He's saying, receive the life of God and don't hide it. Jesus says he has come not to abolish, but to fulfill. He isn't loosening the moral life into a vague niceness. He's deepening it into a whole life faith. Heart, speech, money, relationships, the way we treat the vulnerable, the way we tell the truth. And then he says something that sounds intimidating. At least it was to me until I read it again and again and heard it as hope. Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees. That exceeding isn't about being stricter. It's about being truer. Less performative, less obsessed with looking holy, more devoted to actually loving. That to me is the common thread through every reading today. Real faith becomes real care. So what do we do with this week? I'm going to stick with my trend as of late and offer 3 simple invitations. Salt-sized, light-sized, and doable. even when the fear is loud. We can practice one act of unhidden goodness. Jesus says we're tempted to hide light like putting it under a bushel basket. So choose one visible, ordinary act of goodness this week and do it on purpose. Write the note. Make the call. Bring the meal. Apologize first. Tip more than you normally would. Volunteer 1 hour. Show up for someone who is alone. Not to be seen, but to refuse the lie that darkness gets the final word. 2, we can fast from performative outrage and feast on merciful action. Isaiah doesn't just critique, he redirects. So consider a gentle fast. One less argument you don't need to win. One less doom scroll session. One less sarcastic comment that makes you feel powerful for 5 seconds and hollow for 5 hours. And replace it with a feast. One concrete act that loosens a burden, especially for someone whose life is already heavy. 3, we can ask the simplest prayer. Here I am. Isaiah promises that when our life turns outward in love, God answers, here I am. So this week, you might flip it as a prayer. Here I am, Lord. Make me salt where things are spoiling. Make me light where people are afraid. Short, honest, repeatable. Because the goal is not for you or me to be spiritual celebrities. The goal is for us to become steady. The kind of person who, in fearful times, doesn't shrink into numbness or harden into contempt. Salt doesn't panic, it preserves. Light doesn't argue with darkness, it shines. And the beautiful, quietly shocking claim of Jesus is that this is not reserved for the extraordinary. It's for you. It's for me. It's for all of us. It's for the church. Not as a spotlight, but as a lamp, helping people find their way home. So when fear tells you to disappear, remember what Jesus says. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And then when you call out, when you cry for help, when you wonder if anything matters, God does not answer with a spreadsheet of your religious achievements. God answers with presence. Here I am.